Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lallo.
And we are recording a little early this Tuesday because we have a guest coming to us from Switzerland, Ella Summers. And we're going to be talking about, she does urban fantasy. She's recently been in one of these big multi-author box sets that sold like 30,000 copies. And she's also relaunching an old series, it looks like. So we're going to talk to her about those things. And she's selling really well, so try to pump her for secrets. But let me read your intro real quick here, Ella, or your bio. She's the international best-selling author of the paranormal and fantasy series Legion of Angels, Dragonborn, and Sorcery and Science. She likes books with lots of action, adventure, and romance. When she's not busy writing or spending time with her two young children, she makes the world safe by fighting robots. And how do you do that, Ella?
Oh, it's actually just a joke. We have one of those lawnmower robots, and I'm always fighting with it to behave itself.
Is that like the Roomba, the automatic kind of?
Robo-Mo, I think it's called.
Yeah, my dogs would be pretty freaked out by that, I'm pretty sure. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started?
Okay, I've been writing pretty much forever. When I was a little kid, I would, write little stories as soon as I could write. And I actually went to school for creative writing, so that's what I studied at the university. So I'm actually doing what I studied. Imagine that. And I wrote my first novel when I was 12 years old, and it was really bad, of course. But over the years, I wrote many more, and I found that you read a lot, you write a lot, and eventually something comes that is good enough.
It looks like you got started publishing in 2005, self-publishing. Did you try to do traditional stuff first, or I'm just looking at Amazon at your history.
2005. No, it was like 3 years ago, I think. 2000. Well, I think it was 2014. I don't know. It was roughly 3 years ago. I didn't ever try to go with traditional publishing. I never queried anyone. I actually probably would still not be publishing unless I'd heard about this whole independent publishing movement. And I thought, well, why not? I'll just do it because I've by now written so many novels, and I found that I could put it out then.
All right. Well, whether it was 2014 or 2015, you've gotten things rolling pretty quickly. It looks like all of your series are selling really well right now. And you published quite a bit in 2016. What's the secret? Did you kind of have a lot of them built up and ready to go, or you just
have a lot of them done? In the beginning, I had a few. This is the first series I released, which I'm now rebooting because I don't think it's not really fitting my brand, so I had to make it fit my brand better. But in terms of writing, I don't consider myself a fast writer. I just work a lot of hours. So that's how I'm able to put out books. But I do find that if I do too many in a row, I do need a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I think Dean Wesley Smith on his blog, he's mentioned, he's super prolific. I feel like he puts like a novel and a whole thing of short stories together every month. But he says he only writes like 1,000 words an hour and, maybe hunt and peck typing. He's like, the secret is just to have your butt in the chair for a lot of hours every day.
Yeah, I think that different styles lend themselves to different sort of speeds. And the thing is, what I write, I actually don't throw out most of anything, so it's pretty efficient, even though I'm rather slow. What I write is, most of it is in the final. It just gets a bit longer.
And what made you decide to kind of jump into this fantasy? It looks like most of the covers look like kind of urban fantasy. Is it
It's urban. Yeah, it's urban fantasy, and I guess it's just what I like to read, and so I understood the genre and what people liked in the genre and what I liked in the genre. And I find that of the fantasy type genres, it's very accessible to normal people. Like, I'm not really a normal person because I've always liked this fantasy and science fiction and things like that. So when I'm hitting a certain market, like I am with urban fantasy, I feel like I get not just the traditional, what you would think of fantasy and science fiction readers. I get a lot of crossover with paranormal romance because I, have some sexy things happening in my books. Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things about urban fantasy, because you have this convergence of magic and romance and mystery and all of this together, and I think it has a pretty wide appeal.
Yeah, it's definitely true. Like, it's something that we've noticed on here is that urban fantasy can be a pretty wide umbrella, which can be a really great thing because it can get a big audience, but it can also be a really unfortunate thing because some of the smaller subgenres that don't have their own category yet tend to get lumped in and then lost in the urban fantasy umbrella. But more to the point, you talked about how you've been writing forever, and then you decided to self-publish. When you finally self-published, the first one that you self-published, did you write that specifically with publication in mind, or did you go with one of the things you've written before and just sort of brush it up?
At the time, it was something that I was just working on at the time, and I had like several novels in that series already finished. In retrospect, I probably should have understood like the market a bit better before I did that. I think there wasn't really anything wrong with it, but it wasn't necessarily as marketable as my other stuff, which really took off. So that's why I'm now rebranding it, because I feel you need to have a consistent feeling that readers get. Not necessarily you have to have the same things happen in the books, but the emotions, this what I call emotional resonance, needs to be similar between your books. So that's why I'm now rebooting it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we talk a lot on this show about writing to market, and there's people who are for and against it. But if you have things written and things that are in your wheelhouse, and some of them are more to market than other, it certainly makes good sense to push the things that are closer to the market. So I could see, and that is the sort of thing you learn after you've published a book. Unfortunately, that's unless you listen to a lot of podcasts like this.
Yeah, I don't. I know that right to market has gotten some bad publicity, and I don't really consider myself necessarily writing to market so much as being aware of the market. So I think the tendency when you write to market is that you have to do this, 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 and this, these like tropes, right? And I think that that's potentially approaching that in the wrong way. I think that the way you have to see this is a bit deeper. Why do people like this book, this book, this book? What happens? Like, what sort of feeling? How do they connect to it? And understanding that is like the shortcut, I guess, is to say the tropes. But it's I think much deeper than that. Is like, why do they like this? And it's not so simple as, you need to write a billionaire stepbrother vampire baby book.
Yeah, it's not like I think definitely one of the bad ways that right to market happens is when somebody treats it like a checklist and don't understand why the elements are on that list, because that's why you're writing them, not just because somebody made a list, but because a good story tends to produce these elements. So if your story produced these elements, it might be a good story.
Right.
All right, one more little short question before I hand you off is about how long is your average book, like word count wise?
I shoot for 60 to 70K. Some of my books go slightly shorter and some unfortunately go a bit longer. And I like this range because there's a reason. I feel like not only can you keep this whole idea in your head, because I plot everything because I'm, have OCD and all that, but I feel like you can get this whole, thing plotted out. And the other really good thing is you can edit through it in a day and you can read through it in a day. So you can keep everything in your head. So if you go too long, like 100K, I'm a pretty fast reader, but I read my own stuff very slowly. I feel like that's not that's too long for me to keep it all in my head, because I do like a check where I'm like, okay, consistency, is it all consistent? If I read it all in one go, it's much easier to do that. Or yeah, just to have it all fresh in your head at once is, I feel, much simpler. And then I can produce a few more books than if I write all like really huge books. So I write this like little goal, 60K in my Scrivener project, and yeah.
Alrighty. So now that you're actually talking about goals, whatnot, do you maintain a strict schedule when you're writing? I mean, do you, obviously you set goals for yourself? Do you, is it word counts, specific progress through the book? How does that work for you?
Well, I try not to set a word count goal, because as I said, I'm quite slow, and then I feel very depressed. I'm like, I wrote like 500 words this hour. I am, such a horrible writer and all that. But I do try to say I want to work on this many chapters today. And I usually don't do that because I'm overly optimistic of how fast I am. And this is something my husband's always telling me, you always too optimistic about how fast you think you can write it in like a week. I'm like, so I no longer put this in my calendar because it was getting depressing which chapters I'm going to work on each day. So I have a general idea of like, I want to get this done in a certain time frame, but I found that it's more important to not rush it, because when I rush it, then bad things happen. And I just went through a summer where I had a lot of goals that were external to me, so I can't really move them because of the set I was doing. And so I was working like, 16 hours a day, and that's not really so nice.
My wife does the same thing to me. She's like, how long do you think it'll take you to write this next fantasy? I'm like, I can get it done in about a month's time. Yeah, that would be no interruptions. Parents leave me the heck alone. Friends, computer tech calls. Everybody leaves me alone to write. And then again, I've got a dog to take care of. I mean, just there's no end to the interruptions. So, and not only that, there's this thing called the internet, which I have a nasty habit of doing some research for the book, and I'm right off on a tangent, and I've just lost a couple hours of time. So yeah, I know what you mean.
Crazy. I try to, when it's something that requires research, I put in like a little bracket, like look this up later, and I find that keeps my tangents to a minimum.
I'll have to try that.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing. I'll be writing along, and I often turn off the internet so I can't go away. There's nothing else on my computer to do without internet, and I'll just put like brackets check, and then go on to keep going on. And even if it's looking up a name of like a minor character, I'm like, name, do it later when I'm editing. All right, so I was, peeking around at your Amazon, all your books for sale, and you just launched this, I say it right, Sorcery and Science, book 1, and it's selling really well. And it looks like this is kind of a relaunch of a series, the series you originally started out doing. And the old ones, they have maybe 4 or 5 reviews, so I can see why you wanted to kind of rebrand it and give it another shot. Could you talk about, how that came about and what your strategy has been?
Yeah, I was thinking about this for a long time, because I do like to write what I wanted to write. It's not just about the market, but if I have like a project, like writing the next book in this series will a lot of people are waiting for it and it will make more money versus something that doesn't really have a following, it makes it very, I guess, easy to decide, but then on the other hand, hard for me. And I really feel like I need to finish things more, because I have a lot of series, and I don't want to be the one who never finishes anything. So I was like agonizing over this forever. And finally I decided, okay, I'm going to reboot this, because I feel like I need to put it in line with my other things. I need to give it this, as I said, emotional resonance of the other series. And at that time, the Dominion Rising set, they were contacting me because they had an opening. So I was like the last one to join. And I thought, well, you know what? This is fantasy and it's science fiction. And I have this series that I want to reboot, which kind of mixes fantasy and science fiction. So it would be kind of a good idea, if I'm going to reboot it anyway, to put the new prequel into the set and then launch the same book one, book one in that same series that week. So I think it was a few days later, I launched it. And this, coinciding them together. I'm not sure if it was the right choice, but I didn't want to never finish it because, I mean, it is like a little bit weird. I mean, not weird in a bad way. I mean, like, I like Farscape, so I'm weird, But it mixes, it's like urban fantasy, and it mixes in some of this like other worlds going on. So I guess you would say it's like Buffy meets Veronica Mars meets Stargate. And I still try to make it appeal to my readership by having, these familiar feelings that you get. There's like the mystery to solve. There is the love interest. And the usual things, and I added in more of the paranormal. I'm not sure if it's still too weird. That remains to be seen. But I felt like it deserved at least a shot. And yeah.
Just so you know, everybody listening that listens to this podcast is like, wait, Farscape isn't normal? Are you saying I'm weird too? You're talking to your people here. So did you write, is the prequel all new then to run that box set?
Okay, so the thing is I had quite a lot of material before. I don't know how more. It was over 500,000 words. And I had to condense it because I was going from this sort of urban fantasy style, but more like epic fantasy, which apparently I can't write because I'm just an urban fantasy person, apparently. So I took some material. The prequel, like the stories that I'm telling are kind of new, but I'm incorporating some of the old material. So, I mean, it's probably just as much work as writing a new book, but I wanted to incorporate it so that people who read the old one, they could, kind of see that it's still following the same overall arc, like of what's going to happen, like the big stuff. It's just some of the trimmings are slightly different. And then the voice was changed a bit. So I switched to first person because I was going to follow just one main character, and yeah.
It sounds like a really good idea. I think a lot of authors don't hit it out of the park with their first series, and there it is, just sitting there, and they don't know how to you can only advertise book one so many times. And I love the idea of doing like a multi-author box set, where you're going to sell all these copies and get exposed to all these new readers, and then presumably at the end of the story, you're like, oh, and also check out, here's the book one in your relaunch series.
Yeah, I think I got a boost from that, and I think they got a boost from me too, because I'm sure you've noticed that when you sell a lot of books in the release, and other people are releasing at the same time, and they also sell a lot, that you are propagating each other's also bots, and then weeks, months later, it starts becoming more your own books. But in the beginning, you'll find that whatever's hot and releasing in your genre at the same time will be in your also bots. So I think we kind of cross-pollinated, so to speak, with the also bots. So that might have pushed it also to new readers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I remember we actually had Gwen on the show back in April, I think, when she just had the pre-order up. And I know that box set was asking for all new novels, as opposed to, most box sets, we're taking our old book ones, and you can still have a good release and still, get exposed to new readers. But if it's a new novel from you, of course, all of your readers too are going to be excited to go out and buy it.
Yeah, and that's, for me, what made it more interesting, because I mean, if I'm writing to my readers and I say, well, here's a book you've already read in a set, and they're like, yeah, okay, give me something new.
Right. And plus they're probably like, wait a minute, it's only 99 cents and I bought it when it was $4 or $5 or whatever.
Yeah, so for now, we all have to have it exclusive to the set. And I decided a prequel, and I'm still debating what to do with it later. It will either be a bonus for my newsletter, or maybe I'll put it on BookFunnel or something. I'm not really sure yet. but I feel like, okay, everyone, it's gotten that particular use out of it. I mean, I would have made more money off of it if I had released it myself, but this wasn't just about short-term game. This is about, you know, larger, gaining new readers, a larger long-term game. So yeah.
Right. And for the book one itself, did you go in and it sounds like you kind of edited it a little bit too. It's not just the same book with a new cover. Is that right?
It has some material from several books, but it's also like has new things in it. So and of course I also changed something about the world. So originally in the other series it was more, as I said, epic style. So it was like one world, and then there were still these portals, but instead of, they weren't really inter-world portals, they were in the same world. And then I said, okay, I'm going to up the sci-fi and I'm going to up the paranormal. So then I turned the divisions more into like the witches and vampires and whatnot, and at the same time made it larger scale. So now the new tagline is urban fantasy galactic consequences.
I like it. All right, cool. No, it's really encouraging to hear someone doing this, because I think a lot of us think about, we have that series, especially if you've been publishing for a while, that often the first thing you published was not a, not a bestseller or overnight hit. So it's cool to hear how you went about kind of updating it to appeal to your existing readers and maybe grab some new folks.
Okay, so therefore I have to ask, and since you've been talking about rebooting a series, how long would a series have to be selling or performing poorly before you'd consider revamping it and trying it again?
Well, I think that I probably won't do it again, a reboot, because it is very time consuming and very expensive. And
those covers aren't cheap.
No, those covers were not cheap. If you think about how much I spent on covers, it's a bit shocking. I think I would instead write new series, and then see how they do. Maybe if something is short, just like start it short and then make it longer if it does well. I'm not really sure, because I say these things, but then in reality, I just decide on something because, you know, I'm like thick-headed and just go with it. But I really am trying now to make something that is marketable. So the reboot is just the prequel and 5 books, and I think I can handle that. My biggest selling series is going to be 12 books, and it's selling well, so that works out.
Definitely.
And then my sort of the series that made me, that kickstarted my career, you would say, is several series intermixed, and so it's even longer. It's going to be insanely long by the time it's done. So I think that I would approach this nowadays thinking, can I sell this? And, you know, as I said before, it's not really about right to market so much as, would my readers like this? What sorts of things do they like? And am I being too weird? And, you know, already with the reboot, I'm like already pushing it, because I'm a genre pusher, so I like blend a lot. So I have to be, you know, I have to think about this before I release something, and I think that's how I will avoid having to reboot things later.
Yeah, good point.
Good for you, by the way, on asking yourself if your fans will think something is too weird. Because another thing that regular listeners of the show will know is that I ask myself that question, but I ignore the answer to it. And as you say, just end up writing what you were planning to write. All right, so you mentioned earlier that the urban fantasy is sort of one of your favorite genres to read. Is there any series of books that particularly inspired you or helped you sort of set your expectations for the genre?
I wouldn't say any one series. I read like several, and I think that that's actually also important, because when you only read, say, one series or one author or a very limited set, a limited even style within the genre, then you limit yourself, because it's like, you know, you are what you eat. It's here, you are what you read. And if you're only reading this very, very, very specific thing, then all you end up doing is writing copycat books, and no one really wants that, right?
Yeah, it's true. I've heard a lot of people who like, I think it's what Driz Jordan or whatever, the dark elf character, who people read the books that feature him and assume that that's the way that character is supposed to be written, and not realize that that was formerly a standout character that now has been copied ad nauseum. So I could definitely see just having more crayons in your coloring box so that you can have a more colorful picture once you start drawing your own pictures is a good idea. And to that end, are there any genres you haven't written in that you can imagine one day writing a novel, or is this sort of, sci-fi, fantasy, and combinations thereof going to remain your wheelhouse?
Well, I can't say exactly because, then I will contradict myself in the future. But I think I'll stay within my main thing is urban paranormal, and then I blend with it. So with Legion of Angels, which is my biggest, my top seller, I blended in steampunk with urban fantasy. So it's still predominantly an urban fantasy story. The style of it is urban fantasy, but their technology is not run like ours. It's run with this magitech, so sort of magic steam. And then I blended in the sorcery and science a bit of sci-fi in with the fantasy. I wouldn't try, hard sci-fi because I'm not a hard sci-fi person. But I think it's important to pick like what your main, like not necessarily your genre, but like your feeling, because if you write one book in one style and you write one book in another, there's a danger that your readers will not be the same for both. But as long as you keep it like these certain feelings they get when you read it, again back to the emotional resonance, then I think you can blend in a bit more because they're used to how they feel when they read your book. So it's not as much the genre as the feelings, but I think an easy way to do this is to stick with your main genre and then kind of blend. But that's just how I do it.
Yeah, and if you started with a big enough playground, then you don't really have to branch out too much in order to find new things to say.
Yep.
Jeff?
Sorry, I had it muted. I'm like, why isn't no one responding? Oh, that would be why. Okay. All right. Earlier, you've touched on urban fantasy tropes, so I have to ask, what are the popular tropes for urban fantasy, in case someone was considering trying their hand at this genre?
Well,
and do your books follow those tropes?
There are some things that you should follow, because if you don't, you'll get in trouble. And as I said, with urban fantasy, there's so much crossover with paranormal romance that there are certain things from the romance genre that you simply cannot ignore, because you will then alienate part of your readership. And you introduce a love interest. If you start toying with them and then having her go between different love interests or any of those things that romance people don't like, then you run into trouble. I can, however, because it's urban fantasy and I don't market myself as romance, take longer to get the couple together. But I do have to get them together because eventually they start breathing down my neck that this, like, why are you dragging it out? This should happen now. Yes, so I think that's one thing. I mean, there are a lot of tropes in urban fantasy because it takes its roots from so many different genres. So I don't know if it's like necessarily like you could compile a list, but you have, like, for one is like the hidden magic is one, or the forbidden magic, or so just the solving a mystery in the urban fantasy is quite common. I don't actually have a list, and I don't think about it in tropes, or as the more sophisticated people like to call archetypes.
None of that sophistication here. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I wasn't sophisticated enough for the university because I wrote, genre fiction. So I think I've lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so tropes. I don't think of it as in tropes. I really and as I said, I don't even think of it right to market. I think of it as understanding your audience. And seeing how much you can do that's original, like how do you blend? And if you do only tropes, then you're interchangeable with like every author who only does tropes. So I am not a proponent of just write tropes. You need to put in something of your own, because if you don't, then, as I said, they can just go to someone else, and why would they have brand loyalty to you? So if you really want to build a brand, you have to say, okay, this is what you get from me that's special. For instance, let's see, in Legion of Angels, I had this idea. Okay, so it's urban fantasy, and it's set in a world where there was a great war long ago between gods and demons, and now it's not really post-apocalyptic, but they have monsters running along the plains, and they have to have these big walls to separate them out so they don't come and overrule the human cities and eat everyone. So I came up with this sort of mixed idea, and it's not really uncommon to have that sort of stuff in urban fantasy, but it's like, but I have other things in there, right? I mixed in the steampunk, and more things that I did was sorry, your notes are distracting me.
No, sorry. I watched a delivery truck just pulled up, and I'm like, oh God, he's gonna ring the doorbell. So I'm muting myself here because that's gonna happen. The dog's gonna bark.
Yeah, so the idea for that is like, what can you get from me? Yeah, you get these urban fantasy things that you want and you like, but you also get this concept of, in this book, they're part of the gods' army. So as part of the gods' army, you drink this nectar of the gods. And what happens is you drink it and you level up, or you get promoted to the next level of this military organization, or you're not strong enough and you die. And that's the same for every level. So level up or die. And I think this was something that wasn't there necessarily before. So I, tried to put in something of my own and not just follow tropes.
Don't you just love it when you get an email from a reader that says, by the way, you're not doing this fast enough. You need to do this, 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 this. I'm like, thank you for that. I'll keep that under advisement. Go away.
Well, they're always telling me, I was like, I just released a book. When's the next one coming? I'm like, yeah, when I recover, maybe, from writing that book.
It always happens. Like, I just read your latest novel. That's great. When's the next one? I'm like, I can't just pop these things out. I'm not Lindsay Baroque or anything, but it takes me a little bit to write them. Oh, speaking of which, that's it for me. Let me hand you over to Lindsay so she can get going on the marketing side of things.
Alrighty. Well, since we were kind of talking about that box set earlier and how it's been helpful for you in launching or relaunching your series, could you tell us like what you guys were all doing to get those 30,000 sales? I mean, I know there was a long pre-order and that helped out, but what are some of the things that you guys did to make sure it was really successful?
Well, okay, so granted, I came in at the end, so I wasn't around for most of that. I know they did a long pre-order, so they got a longer than usual pre-order. And Gwen has like a white paper on this. I don't know if you guys have seen it. So, I mean, that's probably a better source of information. So they did I don't even know how long it was, 6 months or so. It was like longer than you can usually do as a pre-order. So that helped. And I believe this is before my time. They did a special first on Apple deal to get some Apple promotion, because those non-Amazon sales are pretty important. And there was like lots of cross promotion. I don't know, like it was like BookBub size, the amount of cross promotion, the raw audience size of all of the authors they got to contribute and mail out. And I think everyone took on a task that they could do. And I was kind of late, and I'm not good at advertising. My marketing is in writing the book and sort of designing it and packaging it. But I do have a pretty enthusiastic readership. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. When the first time I announce the book, the box set, to my audience, and I have a pretty large mailing list, I will at the same time release another one of my books. And at that point, it was the 5th Legion of Angels book. And what happened then is this algorithm magic with the also bots, because I dumped both at the same time. So we were top page of each other's also bots. And I think that might have contributed to it, in addition to the sales from the audience. And because it was new books from everyone, and for me, my audience actually bought the books. If I had to tell my audience, here's the book you've already read, buy the set, they would be less enthusiastic. And I think, yeah, the new books was really important, and the mixture of fantasy and science fiction, because that's a larger readership. And typically, I think these sets are more focused on one thing or the other, like, you know, paranormal romance, urban fantasy, or whatnot. There are some that are larger, but fantasy and science fiction, I'm not sure if there have been any, maybe, but not so many. Yeah, so new books, larger audience, and I think a lot of authors who just spent an insane amount of time promoting it and working on it. And for me, that meant writing a lot of books. We also wrote short. We had like a swag pack, so the people who ordered in the beginning pre-ordered it, or in the first week got like some bonus stuff, a link in the book. And for me, that was a short story in my most popular series, and some people admitted they bought the set just for that. So I mean, it's 99 cents, and then you get a story. It's, I guess, not such a big deal. So I think that's like, I think it was like hit from every single angle, and that was what made it go so well. And then the fact the authors were all hardworking, and when Gwen approached me, I was like asking around. I'm like, so what's going on? What are they doing? Because I know there've been some scandals, I've been told, in this box set. And I said, I'm not getting involved in any shenanigans because I don't have time for that. I don't want to be in trouble with anything. So, and everyone said they're good people and they're not doing any nonsense. And I can say there was nothing bad going on. There was no gifting or any of that other stuff that recently made headlines. So yeah, I think just a solid marketing plan for that and lots of hard work.
Yeah, there's definitely been some box sets in the past where there's been shady methods used to, you know, because people want to hit the New York Times bestseller list, and that takes like 12,000 copies sold at least.
Well, we were snubbed.
Yeah, I heard that.
we were kicked off, but it's like that's not really the point. The point, I mean, for me was like about getting new readers and this cross-pollination. So yeah, it's kind of stupid they did that. It just shows that they're still gatekeepers, but it's not like, oh my God, my life has ended. I don't think it makes really any difference. But yeah, it's
weird because the New York Times seems to sometimes not allow the multi-author box set on their list, and other ones get through, so you don't really know what their policy is. It's
whatever they felt like at the time.
Yeah, there's like, oh no, that one, just don't like the cover on that one. But it's good to know you guys were able to sell so much, and I imagine just the fact that you had like 23 authors in there, all hitting their mailing lists on the release week, helped. And for people listening, I think that she used Pronoun to get the long pre-order on Amazon, because otherwise Amazon only lets you have 3 months usually, but I believe if you use them, you can do a longer pre-order and also get 70% on a 99-cent book, and that's a big difference when you're selling.
Yeah, that is a big difference.
Copies, yeah. All right, well, before I pass you off here, I'm curious if, you know, you mentioned that it was really broad, science fiction and fantasy, and usually the box sets are more pinpoint. Do you feel like you're going to get as many people who are interested in your particular style of fantasy, or do you feel that by being so broad that might have limited how many people will actually enjoy maybe urban fantasy versus maybe they just bought it for the spaceships? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's too early to say because it's just launched. But there is a reason that I put that particular series in the set, because it was a mixture of science fiction into the fantasy. So if they completely hate that, then they definitely won't like my other stuff. But it has the same feeling as my other stuff. So if they like it, then they will hopefully like my other books too. Yeah, so I think it's really too early to say how it's going to work out. We'll just have to see.
Yeah. All right. So it's Dominion Rising is listed as having 23 brand new novels, and I suspect having 23 new novels is a big part of why it was so successful. So I guess one question I have is like, you say you got in somewhere toward the end of the process, but were they reaching out to people who had books that were nearly done, or was this set up long enough in advance that everyone knew they were writing a novel just for this release?
I I think that it was talked about quite a long time before this, but I really don't know the specifics. I just know that I was, approached when an opening in the set came up, and I was already going to do this reboot, and I just pushed it up in my schedule. But yeah, it is an enormous amount of work, and you have to think about, okay, you write a new book, and if you release it yourself, probably the authors would make more money, but you have to always weigh this short-term, long-term benefit. And whether it will pan out in the long term, we're not really sure yet. I did an anthology last year where I wrote a short story that at the same time I released the second book of my Legion of Angels. And I actually got a lot of readers from that. And it was a fairy tale anthology, and I don't actually write fairy tales. But I got readers from it. So yeah, I mean, I think these things could work, could not. It depends. You don't really know until you do it. But it's worth a shot, right?
What would you say is the ideal number of books to be in a multi-author box set? I mean, I've seen them anywhere from 6 or 7 all the way up to like 20, and I think your 23 there is like probably the most I think I've ever seen. I was just wondering if there's like a minimum number you guys shoot for.
Well, I guess that's something you would have to ask organizers of sets, and I shouldn't be allowed to organize anything. So there are limitations, of course, like the more you have, the larger the file size is, and then you can't price it at 99 cents, except when you go through like Pronon, I think it's around that, that you can have this huge file size and price at 99 cents. There's also like when it later goes into KYOU, these sorts of things, a lot of these sets go in. If it's really long, then you don't get a payout past a certain page length. So you have to decide, like, what is this? Is it about just making money, or getting new readers, or just making lists or whatever? Because if you have more authors, you have more people to do the marketing, and you have more those authors' mailing lists plus whatever other people they get to write about the set. So
have you ever tried organizing your own box set? Because I get the impression that you have some sort of experience with it. Now you're laughing at me, so I have to say, like, look like going, oh God, no.
Well, I think, I don't know if I'm atypical because I don't know what other people do, but I'm like a writer and I write books, and I don't do advertising really. I've tried a few times and it went really badly. I tried hiring people to do it and it went badly. The thing that works for me is by marketing. The marketing is in the book, and that's the only thing that has seemed to work for me. So I try to kind of combine the two and just do, the writing, and I'm really bad at the other stuff, as my fans should know, because I sometimes disappear for like a few weeks and like, where are you? I'm like, oh, I'm writing a book in my cave, so I'll be out eventually. But they're okay with it because they want the books faster. And yeah, I mean, I should maybe try other forms of marketing, but I found that the best marketing is another book and another series also brings up your other books and other series. So I should start writing shorter series so I can more often have a new series.
There you go.
Yeah, that'll go well, since you started out saying you're doing 12 books and you're.
I'm going to finish that. I'm going to finish. I have it all planned out.
All right, so I'm curious because the box set is wide. You guys were hoping to make some lists and get exposure everywhere, but you seem to be exclusive with Amazon with all of your other books. Were you worried at all that people would read it on Apple and be like, where are the other books?
Well, I guess somewhat, not really worried, but like it's more like a lost opportunity. But I think these are all different outlets. So KYOU is that readership is different than like you know, other Amazon that buys books versus the other retailers. And I am actually thinking about other retailers because I think it's important to expand. It's like at the moment I'm just kind of lazy and dealing with just Amazon. Plus, they keep sending me all-star bonuses, so I have to. It's kind of tempting to stay with them, but I think long term, I don't know. I'm still debating it. Maybe I'll have a different thing to say in like a year from now, but yeah. Especially now, like this month's payout being what it was, there are some talk. There's some people are talking about leaving, and I'm not really sure yet. But I am giving it hard thought about what to do, because I feel like I do have wider appeal than just KU, and sometimes I don't like, there are really great KU readers, but there are also some people who only want to read like the same stuff, and if you're too weird, then they don't like it. And you know, as I said, I'm weird, so so I feel like maybe I can, you know, reach new people through other outlets at some point. But you know, it's like there's the money and then the short term and then there's the long term career, and you have to balance them, and I don't write fast enough to do everything. So yeah. I might think about putting some of the older stuff out on other platforms, and then sort of at some point doing a mix, but I have to do this slowly and thoughtfully and carefully, and yeah, so I'm not really sure yet.
Yeah, I launched my first series into Kindle Unlimited last year, and I was just going to do it for like 90 days, maybe max of 180, but it helped a lot with the visibility and sticking, of course. And like, you know, I was getting the bonuses, and then I noticed I'd get an email like every time I was thinking of taking something out. Hey, do you want to be I don't even remember what it is. They're deals.
Kindle Daily deal. Oh, those are great.
Yeah.
I keep getting those. So one of my Kindle, it was a Kindle monthly deal in Australia. I made number 9 in the entire Kindle store in Australia just on that deal.
And there's all kinds of weird people in Australia, so they're just your fans.
I love
you didn't even know it.
I would move there in a heartbeat.
I know. So it's away from all the political stuff too, but we don't talk about that on this show. So.
Oh, there's no politics in Switzerland anyway, right?
Of course not. That's the neutral country, right? So one question though, since you have been in KU for a while and people may be considering it themselves, have you found it to be really, it sounds like for urban fantasy, it's been a great match for you, getting bonuses and ranking really well?
I think that when I first started in releasing urban fantasy in KU, there weren't so many books doing urban fantasy in KU. I mean, there were some, but I feel like it's exploded since I, you know, had success with the Dragonborn. So I'm not really sure. It's, I think, becoming more difficult to get visibility now. You really have to work extra hard. I mean, even for me, I just redid all these covers to create branding because I wanted people to see my books and to know they're my books. And when Dragonborn became popular, I had tons and tons of people with nearly identical covers to mine, and that's not good for branding people and not good. So I redid all of those and over a long period of time. And I feel like it's important, if you want to stand out in KU, you need something that, you know, identifies you as different. And yet you're different, yet you're the same, because if you're too weird, then it scares them off, right? So you really need to do this balance, and this is all about creating an author brand. And you have to say, this is what I do, and you do it in your writing, you do it in your covers, you do it in your blurbs. Everything goes down to that. I am this genre or this set of genres with these unique things, and if you put that in everything, then you can stand apart. Though that's not to say you can't become popular looking like someone else. I have a lot of lookalikes before I switch covers. So I mean, there's also like a way to do that. But I personally would prefer, and I think a lot of artists would prefer, to get there by doing something different and, you know, standing out, but standing out in a comfortable way, so to speak. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's amazing. Two of the things about, and you hit both of them with that, is one of the most frustrating things about the book business seems to be that literally every part of it is a balancing act. And one of the other most frustrating things is that you can get success through completely diametrically opposed techniques. So it's really hard to figure out what advice is going to work for you. So it's amazing. Like that's why, you know, it's good to have so many different guests on a show like this.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to not just listen to what one person says and say, that's the road to success. Or if one person, like if someone says, okay, this is how I did it, everyone has to do it that way. You shouldn't listen to that person, because there's so many different ways to do it, and you have to do what works for you. Like, where are your strengths? Where do you want to spend your time? There's so few hours in the day. You need to decide, what am I working on? What is my focus? You know, and as I said, what is my brand? You need to make a lot of decisions, and it's like this or that. You can't do everything. You must pick what your plan is, and you have to pick what works for you.
Yeah, very much so. So we talked a little bit about how this book was eligible for a number of bestseller lists and landed on some and not on others. One of the things about bestseller lists is that you can't be a bestseller if you're exclusive to Amazon.
Well, you can be Wall Street Journal exclusive to
can?
Amazon. Yes, you can.
I never even thought about the Wall Street Journal.
Yes, we made Wall Street Journal, I think, number 4 or something. Yeah, for that one, you can be exclusive to Amazon. Wow.
All right, so I guess a little quick question. It doesn't sound like you were terribly focused on hitting a bestseller list, but do you feel like the ability to hit the more well-known bestseller lists is reason enough to go wide on this sort of thing, or should that just be one of many other elements for doing so?
For a box set, you mean?
For a box set, or really anything, but box set in this case.
Well, I think again, it depends on what your goals are, because there are some that are in KYOU. So the anthology I did was Amazon only, so it was exclusive there, and that got me readers. So, you know, that's one goal, if that's your goal. I think that with the Dominion Rising, there were multiple goals going on. So they wanted to hit lists, they wanted to get new readers. I mean, there were all of these tons of things going on. So yeah, it really depends on what your goal is. And for people, if they want to make a list, then it's of course easier when you have a whole team doing it with you. So yeah, as always, it depends. The famous answer, it depends.
Okay, you touched on this briefly, you know, going, you know, KYOU versus wide. And my own take on KYOU is quite well known. No need to go into that again there. Is there any set of circumstances which would cause you not to recommend choosing KYOU when you first release a novel?
I guess you would have to look at your genre and see how it does. You know, do you have a genre that's marketable in or out of KYOU? And as I said, when I started urban fantasy, there wasn't so much in KYOU. So in some ways that gave me an advantage, because then the KYOU readers came to me. Yeah, I don't know. I think if you're writing also something that is really out there, there might be an advantage to not going to the KYOU, because I think people who read, not all KYOU people, I don't want to say that KYOU people only want tropes and whatnot, but I find that there are some that really do want something more comfortable, and if you push too many buttons, there could be a problem. So
yeah, no, we're not going to go there. I've already done this. So before I get going on that, let me give you over to Lindsay.
Yes, we have to cut Jeff off whenever he starts ranting and trying to get us all kicked out of Amazon. All right, we're just got a couple questions left before we let you go to bed here. You mentioned that you had a pretty big mailing list built up, you know, even though you've only been publishing for 2 or 3 years. What have you done to get all those people on your list?
I put in my back matter at the very end. if you want to hear about my new releases, join my mailing list, and then after that I write about asking for reviews, and after that I write about what's coming next in the series. And I have a mailing list sign up form on my website. I don't offer an incentive, actually, besides to hear about my new books. I will, however, I don't publish it, but I do often release the books like at a lower price point. Not 99 cents. I hate that price point with a passion because I don't want to make 35 cents on a book. I will occasionally use it, but I often will release it if it's a $3.99 book at $2.99 for like 2 days, or if it's a $4.99 book at $3.99 for those 2 days. But I don't advertise that because I don't always do it, and I don't want to promise things I don't deliver. Yeah, I don't really do so much for that. I have like kind of at the beginning I did a few of these like promo things, but I kept my promo list is separate than my organic list, and my organic list is actually nearly as large as those giveaway lists. So I mean they're separate. I can see them. So yeah, I think the biggest thing that happened is I wrote books and people wanted to know what happens with the next book, so they signed up to hear about it. And yeah, and I had it in the back matter. Letting people know is really important. If they don't know you have a mailing list, then they're obviously not really going to sign up. I mean, some people track you down, but not everyone, right?
Yeah, I've done it both ways. I've got my old original list was always just like, yeah, if you want to hear about new releases, you know, here's this, here it is, sign up. I'm not giving you anything, nothing. There's no reason to join other than, you know, you'll know when I have new releases, which is good because not everybody is on social media 24/7 watching you and seeing when you release books.
Stalking you.
Yeah. And then I've done it the other way with my science fiction list where I did give away like a prequel. And I will say that built a list about 5 times faster than the other one, but it doesn't, you don't have to do that for sure. And you're proof that.
Well, I do have some extras, but I don't, as again, like the pricing, I don't advertise them. So there are a few short stories that I have that you can get from my list. Or in my Facebook fan, like the private fan page, I also often have links to them. And as I said, I'm toying with the idea of giving out the prequel once it's out of the set as part of the mailing list, but I haven't advertised it, so I can't really say, you know, this is a technique because yeah, I haven't really tried to build it that way. But maybe maybe that's good. I think it's important to have a few carrots, so maybe I need to, you know, get my carrots ready.
Yeah, definitely. Earlier you mentioned how you put some new covers to differentiate yourself, and
Yes.
you've definitely got a very strong theme amongst your covers. Just want to very briefly talk about like what you did to put your new covers together, how you had them designed and whatnot.
Yeah. So currently, I have all of my books rebranded except for one. We haven't gotten around to that yet. So, I mean, the other covers were serving the genre, and they, you know, made me sell pretty well and all. But as I said, I felt like other people were getting the same covers that I had. So it was important to, at a certain point, differentiate yourself. So one thing I did is I was talking to my husband about this, and he said, okay, you know what people who are really big do? They put their name like gigantic on their cover. And then people see your name in like thumbnail, any size. They see this huge thing. So we made sure, okay, I want my name big. And I kept throughout series, that branding is the same. The author name is in the same font, and I have like certain little flourish thing over it that's the same. And then each series has its own font for the titles of the book in that series. And I have a different color for the author name based on the series. So for Legion, it's yellow, and for Dragonborn, it's like this red pink, and for the Sorcery Sign, it's green. So there's a clear branding, but each series you can also, you know, they're like different, but they're the same, right? And that's what I want actually my books to be. It's like they're my books, they're my style, but they're kind of different too than than one another. So we decided that we really were willing to spend money on this, and we went with the whole like complete treatment of getting it with photo shoots and models and everything. And yeah, it creates a very original look, I think. And yeah, it's important. It's like branding is really, really important, that you can stand apart. So that's how we did it, why we did it, and I think it was a good decision.
So when you were rebranding all your books there, I mean, obviously, I'll just tell you, the covers look fantastic. I think you did a really good job on them. What elements do you feel should be included on an urban fantasy cover?
Well, I think you need some sort of magic, and you can typically do this with like sort of glows or fire on the sword, or fire in the hand, or whatever, various magic-y sort of looks. And since I write books about kick-butt female protagonists, they have like a katana or a gun or something that shows these books have action. So what are my books? They're magic, action, romance. So those things in there, not all of them are always put in there. So for the Dragonborn, I have the male and female on the cover, but they're not really romance, so I didn't want them to be like, naked man chests and girls doing this on them. So so I'm like, yeah, they're sexy, but they fight together. So I wanted them the two characters to be in action poses, to show that there's action in these books and that they work together. And because I think it's important to show what sort of books you are. There's also urban fantasy that isn't with like these kick-butt female protagonists. So you would obviously want a slightly different style. Maybe you have a girl in a different outfit, like a dress, and she has magic, and that would be something different than, she has a sword, and it has to fit what's in the book, right? And yeah, so for that, and then in Legion, we just put the female on the female protagonist on the cover, and soon we get to do angel wings. Oh, I'm so excited because she's going to become an angel.
Spoiler alert.
Well, everyone knew that already. And in Sorcery and Science, we did some modeling, 3D modeling for like the golems in the background, and then we have like spaceships and stuff. So yeah, that is something that we did there. And let me think about how. Yeah, I basically also wanted to have a very cinematic style. So when I was going for inspiration, I took clips from like TV shows a lot, like Flash, with these colors that they have going on, and other things like that. Those are really incredible TV posters. So that was my inspiration. Or like Underworld, right? That's where I got the inspiration from a different form of media.
I can only imagine what that conversation must have went like when you got a hold of your cover artist and said, okay, get out the pen and paper. Here's what I want. Something magic-y, something this. They're not really falling in love with it. I can just hear them going, okay. Was it one artist that did all of them, or did you use multiple artists?
Yeah, no, it was one. And what we did is, I think that even though we're writers, it works better to do this visually. So I created a Google slideshow, and each slide, I did the whole series. For the first one we did was I believe Legion, and I had a few notes about, here are the like sort of outfits I want her to wear, here are the sort of like ideas I want, and then each slide was a different book in the series. So there were 12 books, and I went with color ideas. I just pasted like a collage of different things from different posters or books or whatever for inspiration, poses, and just get ideas of all of them. And I think that helped because it's a visual art, so having visual examples really helped to put that into a coherent cover, as opposed to just like writing and then they say, oh my goodness, what is this?
Well, they did a great job. Did you want to plug them real quick? Because like I said, they did a really good job.
Well, I guess the cat's out of the bag, and Lindsay probably already knows who who did my covers, because she's also used him. It was a Gene Mollica in New York. Yeah, he doesn't put his prices on the website, so you know it's going to be expensive.
Those are my most expensive covers. Chains of Honor, if anybody wants to look.
And if you want to see how many covers I did, it was like, I don't know, 20 or 30 or something. Some haven't even been released yet, so you can imagine what an investment that is. But it's like, this is worth it because you really want to create an author brand. Yeah.
Definitely. All right, well, that's it for me. Let me hand it over to Lindsay. We'll see if we can wrap this up for you. You can go to sleep.
All right. Yes, just I guess thanks for coming on, and let us know where people can find you, and maybe if there's one of your book ones you think would be great for them to check out.
Well, I'm at ellasummers.com. I have all the links to my various social medias, which I sometimes remember to post when I release a book. And I don't know, my most popular series is Legion of Angels. So if you want, a lot of people start there nowadays and then move to the other stuff. So yeah, that would be, I guess, a good starting point.
All right, sounds good. And then the Dominion Rising box set looks like it's still 99 cents if people want to.
Yeah, get it before it goes up. It will be going up.
All right, cool. I'll put the links in the show notes. This is episode 146. We're getting up there, guys. Come on by marketingsff.com if you forget and want the links, and they'll be there. All right. Thanks, Ella. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks for listening, everyone.
It was nice to meet you, Ella. Thanks for all the info.
Bye.
So long, everybody.